Okay, so for the hangman, you're going to end up having to break some of your code into methods. Notice that I have 356 lines of code. It's not like it's an accomplishment or anything, but hangman, there's a lot more to do than just rock, paper, scissors for what we have to think about. So I have code broken up into methods. I have 6 methods to help run my code. So let's kind of talk about methods. And methods, really all they are like mini programs. Okay. For now, this is basically the format that we have. Public static. And then we have a return type, or we type void. We give a name to the method that we're using, and then we put in a parameter and the type of parameter it is, and then we just work it. So if we were looking at Tutorials Point, which is a good resource for you guys to look at, there it is, methods. They're not as complex as what you're thinking. All it is that we are basically setting it up so we can have something that's running and we can avoid being redundant. So the same as how we were using loops to save having to write the same thing over again, that's what methods will do. So if I was to write that here, this right here, what we've been using, the public static void main, that is a method. The way that our code runs is that this will always get called first when we start doing stuff. But we can write other methods using that same format, public static, and let's say I'm going to return an int, and let's just call this add to numbers. Okay, and I am going to use 2 numbers that I need to go into it. So I could say int A and int B. Okay. Public, we don't really need to worry about public or static. You guys are always just going to write that for now. Int is the type. It's the same type where I could have string, boolean, int, double, long, char for a character, double and float. I can return those. I could even create custom types if I wanted to. But we give it a name, and then this is our parameters. And in our parameters, we say what we need to run this method. This method, again, is like a mini program. So I have to have a code block. So that means I'm going to have my squiggle brackets. And because I am returning something, I'm returning an int, that means that the very last line of my code is going to have the words return, and I'm going to have to return something. Now, methods, you have to be very descriptive in them. Otherwise, it's really hard for you and for anybody else to look at your code and understand what you're trying to do. So make sure that your method names are very descriptive in nature. So this is very specific what I want to do. I want to add 2 numbers. I want to add this number, and they're both integers. So in return, I can just say return A plus B. Okay. Now, just because I created the method doesn't mean that I'm using it yet. So if I wanted to system.out.println, I have to actually use the method. I have to call it by typing in the name and giving it the parameters that it wants. So I could say system.out.println, add 2 numbers if I wanted to use it this way, and I could say 10 and 5. I run this. And 15. Now I can reuse that code, that adding 2 numbers, and change this to 15, 20, 45, 1, and 1. And okay, I'm calling that same method so I don't have to rewrite it over and over and over again. This makes it really easy. If I wanted to have my program where I'm taking some type of user input where they're putting in those numbers like we've done already before, I can just call this up whenever I want. I could create another method. Now the key is that the code blocks these. I cannot put a method inside of another method. If you're not paying attention to code brackets and you do something like this, you get all kinds of errors. It doesn't recognize that you're using it. It's saying that there's an expression expected and you need to have a semicolon used. If I have it outside of that code block for main, then all the errors go away. So pay attention to your code blocks, the curly brackets, that you have pairs of them and that they're where you want them to be. If I wanted to create another method, public static, and I could just call this void, and let's say I want to print a line. And in this method, all I want is to, let's say I'm going to do int a and int b again. Okay, now from a method I can call other methods, and this is how you can kind of help break up your code. I could call the same method that I just did. I could pass in that a and that b, because when I'm calling it, I have to make sure that I have the exact same spelling, and I got to pass in the right amount of parameters. This is asking for 2 parameters, and if I only give it 1 parameter, I'm going to get an error. It's saying that it's looking for 2 ints, not 1. Okay. If I don't give it the same types, 2 ints, it's going to end up having an issue. So instead of doing this, I can do system.out.println, add 2 numbers. And I can say that I want to print A and B. So then here I can say print a line, and I can say 10 and 5. So now I even cut out having to print a line. I can just pass in. Okay, we can use it in a lot of different ways. I could take a string. In this case, I'm not returning anything. That's why it's void. Public static. Let's say void. And I want to print string. And I'm going to take a string, input string. The names, these are just temporary variable names for my parameters so that I can use them, so that I could print anything that's put as a parameter. System.out.println, input string. Okay, so I can do print string, and I pass it in a string, hello world. I print it out. And it runs. Okay, that's all that a method is. For the hangman, you're going to end up having to feel fairly confident with arrays and with strings. So what I want you guys to do is I want you to start practicing methods for strings and for arrays. If we're just looking at these, this is Coding Bat. It's in the resources. Just start practicing actually doing this. Now, the best thing about doing a method is that you can make it so you can print what you want. You can return what you want. You can customize your code so that it will work with more situations instead of working in just one. So here we have a method that we need to build that they give us for this one, where it's called public and there's a string that needs to be returned. The name is hello name, and we're taking some type of parameter that we're going to temporarily call name, and it's going to be a string type. So here what we're seeing is an example of the input and what we want for the output. Okay, so we want to use that method, pass in the word Bob, and then be able to print out hello Bob. Now if I just do return hello Bob, exactly like what they got written, and I click go, when it runs the code, it's only going to pass one case. It only passes a case that is exactly hello Bob, not anything else, not hello Alice, not hello Alex, not hello Dolly. So when I use a parameter, I want to use the name that I put there as my temporary variable name. So instead of saying hello Bob, I want to actually replace Bob with whatever they put in as a parameter. So I'm going to cut this up so that I can put name and basically smush these together using the concatenate by using the plus in between. So now if I run this, I forgot a quote. Now I pass every case, because if they put in hello X, since I'm using name as the temporary variable name for that parameter, if they put in X, X is going here. So it's saying hello space X with the exclamation mark, just like what it wants. Okay, this is where you need to be practicing and trying to do it. There's a number of pieces of code that I'm going to introduce, but you get to practice on it in Coding Bat, which will help you a lot. Okay, all right.